Hello. Hello, we're Team Cupcake. My name is Stephanie Moss,
Dylan Simpkins.
I'm Justin Hills.
and we're doing our presentation over personality and sport. When defining personality, it's the psychological core is the deepest component to your personality. It's the real you. For example, it's like your motives, your self-worth, and your values. If your family is something that's important to you, then that's what you value. When it comes to typical responses, it's the ways we usually respond to our environments. And with role-related behavior, it's defined as the way we react within our different hats. It's the characteristics that make us unique. For example, when you're at work, say at a doctor's office, you act more professional, but when you're around your friends, you're more relaxed and laid back. When studying personality, it's the psychodynamic approach. It places emphasis on the unconscious elements of behavior. Also the ID, which is the instinctive desires. Superego, which is moral conscience. The ego, which is the conscience personality. Another approach is the trait approach. It's the fundamental traits of personality that are relatively stable. Situational approach is the behavior that is largely determined by the situation. The interactional approach is the equal parts a person and environment determined on behavior. With the phenomenological approach, it's also the equal parts of a person and environment, except the person half is based off the person's subjective experiences instead of the traits. When coming to measuring personality, there are trait and state measures. Trait is how you typically feel. State is how you feel right now. The situation-specific measures, they consider the personality of the participant as well as the specific situation. For example, getting up in front of a group of people to give a presentation, you might feel nervous. In hanging out with your friends, being around your friends, you're not as nervous. With the sport-specific measures, it's a form of situational measurement that based solely on sport situations. For example, you can test the person before an athletic competition to see how anxious they are, how their anxiety level is affected.
And I think that's us now. All right. You want to take it or you want me to
That's
start
fine.
off?
Using psychological measures. First of all, you must know your limitations. You don't know everything and you are not infallible. Everyone makes mistakes. You have to know where you're at. Don't use psychological tests for team selection. It's unfair, it's profiling, and it's generally inaccurate. Include an explanation and feedback. Assured that everyone kind of understands what's going on. Assured the athletes, most of all, of confidentiality. They want to be able to trust you.
You'll also want to take an intra-individual approach, which means don't assume that they're going to meet the norms. Treat them as an individual person, which it should be already happening. Understand and assess specific personality components. There's typical responses and there's deep personality. The big difference between the two is typical responses can be changed, and just that varies person to person. If someone's taught to react a certain way to a situation, that'll be their typical response. Their deep personality is what's ingrained in them for life. That is who they are, and that's how they're always going to be. That's something that won't change. One way to test that is projective tests, which a good example of that would be an ink blot test, and that shows what you see in the picture, for instance.
Focusing on the research, typically research is done between athletes and non-athletes. And research has shown that there's really no difference as a whole. The differences appeared only when broken down by sport. As another subsection, you can see that female athletes are much different from non-athletes. They're more independent, more aggressive, more achievement-oriented, emotionally stable, and much more assertive. Still continuing on research, positive mental health and the iceberg profile. A way to, excuse me, a way to assess that is using the PALMS method, the profile of mood states, and it's used generally to predict athletic success. Another way is the iceberg profile, which can give you an idea of positive mental health in the area of the PALMS. Also, performance prediction. PALMS is generally accurate most of the time. Exercise and personality. You can break personality down into 3 different sections. The most common are type A and type B. Type A personalities have a strong sense of urgency, excess of competitive drive, and easily aroused with hostility. They have also a higher risk for cardiovascular disease because they got that high blood pressure. Type B personalities, on the other hand, are completely opposite. They're laid back, they're calm in most situations, and usually don't sweat the small details in life. Self-concept goes up in relation to exercise.
Yep, which is just your opinion of yourself, honestly. Some strategies for success here are in-depth interview techniques, such as a qualitative approach. You're finding out why someone is doing something the way they are instead of just seeing as what they are doing. You want to know their reasons behind what's going on. That's what you address, not just, hey, you're doing it wrong. Figure out why they are. Another strategy here you can use is have a mental plan. Really important for coaching is if you can better prepare your players to be mentally ready to handle something, you'll be able to control the reaction. You can teach someone all day how to do something and when to do it, but unless they have that mental ability to discern when it needs to happen or what's going on, they're never going to get far. Your role in understanding personality, like we said earlier, you got to consider both the personality traits and the situation that's happening. If you rely on just one rather than both, it's going to be lopsided and probably horribly inaccurate. Someone who's normally really calm, just on their own, really likes to be quiet, will possibly be extremely loud and boisterous inside a sports game where, for instance, they're playing football. They're going to be loud, they're going to be obnoxious, they're going to be playing. That same person could be really quiet outside of that. Be an informed consumer. Know what you're talking about. Know what's going on. Don't just, hey, this test works to identify what I should have my players do. Actually look into it, figure out why it works, understand why you're going to apply something to them. Be a good communicator is our next point. Talk to your players, talk to anyone who's being evaluated. That's the core of figuring out what's going on and figuring out how to work with their personality. Some people may just come off as being a very strong type A personality, just always aggressive and wanting something. They're not always, it might not honestly be that they're generally like aggressive or angry towards you. It might just be the way they come off. Talk to them, find out, get to know them more. Be a good observer. Like we said earlier with type A and type B personalities, very rarely will a player actually come out and say, hey, I am a type A personality or type B. Generally, if they do, they're proud of having that personality trait. The way to really find out if that is their trait or find out at all what their trait is, you have to observe them and see how their typical responses, like we were talking about earlier. See how they react to things. If they're instantly angry when something doesn't go their way, it's probably not a type B person. And our last point here, be knowledgeable about mental strategies. Like I said earlier, you got to know how to prepare yourself. If you're mentally prepared, you'll do much better than anything else. And that's the best way to do it. Also, since this is the end of our presentation, I included in the email, we're having, as you can see, you can't really see most of the PowerPoint. So I included in our email a copy of the PowerPoint itself so that you can look at. Thank you. And yeah, I think that's all we have left.
Thanks.
White screen.